So yeah, I just come in, make yourselves comfortable. I definitely always take my shoes off. I just want to be able to take some notes because I'm sure you're going to say wonderfully amazing, interesting, informative thing. No, I always learn. There's always a ton of things that I want to look up afterwards. Okay, but yeah, so welcome to Inside the Dumpster Studio. I think this is episode 3. So thanks for being a guinea pig also.
Sure.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Lisa Woods. I am from Austin. I'm a designer. And let's see, how do we run across each other?
I think it was South by Southwest.
Oh, right.
I went to your panel talk on just after the launch of your app, Stories Asunder.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt some possible connections or interests for collaboration that I wanted to approach you. So afterwards I approached your panel and started a conversation.
And then soon thereafter I came to you and spent the night in the dumpster.
Yes. We were really happy to have you, and hopefully it was an inspiring experience.
It was awesome. It was surprisingly cold, right?
Okay.
That was that 1 week.
Oh, yes.
We've had really strange weather in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
That was that 1 week where it was
because
actually really cold.
It must have been April at that point.
Yeah, because it was about a month after South by. Yeah, that sounds about right. I think so.
Yeah, because we talked, and then you guys decompressed, and then we had one conversation with one of your colleagues, and then it was like a week later, so it must have been April. But first, so tell me more about your background.
Let's see. I have been a designer for several years. I started out in print design and moved to interaction design. And Asunder kind of grew out of an interest in storytelling and kind of, doing design in a more proactive way. So if you see something that should be in the world, you should kind of make it. Design provocation, I guess, in a way, kind of the way I think the dumpster is.
I like that expression, design provocation. Yeah.
So maybe it's not the thing itself, but the conversation it sparks after the fact, and where it goes from there, you're never quite sure.
Interesting. Tell me more about some examples about how Stories Asunder. So Stories Asunder, do you want to go into that a little bit?
Sure. So Stories Asunder is basically an iPhone app, and it works with this technology called beacons, which are these, they can be fairly small to fairly large kind of devices. To me, they look like smoke detectors. They're not very fancy, they're not very sexy. And when you place them in the environment, they have a certain range at which they kind of emit a signal, kind of like a radio signal, if you will. And then when a person with the app approaches the beacon, the phone understands where the beacon is, right? So at that point, any kind of interaction can happen. It depends on what you decide. So in our case, a lot of people are using that for retail, and we were kind of going, well, that's a nice way of using it, but are there more interesting ways?
It's a little controversial, the beacon use because it's like a little bit of the movie, the Tom Cruise movie, the
Minority Report.
Yeah, it's a little right. That's the comparison that gets drawn, and I think it's great that I think it's totally ridiculous to try to make that comparison to another completely different use.
True.
But I remember when I was reading about, it's not really even fair to call it controversy, but
it can be controversial. People, obviously, and people should be worried about this because things kind of happen incrementally, and I think we're heading in that direction with the idea of kind of knowing everything about us, exactly where we are. So GPS already kind of does that, and
absolutely,
you're just adding yet another layer of retail, totally knowing when you've entered the store, where you went, what display you went to, when you left their store.
No, absolutely for that, but for example, the other types of use, unless I guess there's something about how easily hackable are they? Is it something where you could, it would just feed into that same sort of world of data, I'm tracking this person and I saw that they triggered these beacons, so they were here at this time. That gets a little creepy.
It gets a little creepy, and I think that's what we're reacting against, right? So our design provocation was to kind of take it and turn this, I don't know what you want to call it, the semi of progress, in a different direction, and we wanted to turn it towards storytelling, right? So instead of learning more information about your consumer habits, what if it were a platform for people that had stories to tell, and that could be fiction, nonfiction, journalism, any kind of story, right? That people have to tell, a crowdsourced sort of thing, and put that in in the system of beacons instead, right? And so that's what Asunder was, and that's kind of where we started. So we had one test story, which was the idea of, can we take an Austin neighborhood and put several beacons in it and have a writer kind of create this experience for it. And it's not just audio, so it can be audio, video, augmented reality. The phone could vibrate at certain times. We didn't build that in, but that's a possibility. Yeah, and text, obviously. And so kind of like, could we, I don't know, repurpose this stuff in a new way.
How long did it take to not just build the app, but get the story? I mean, how did that all develop? I mean, or a brief history of the first, of Stories Asunder.
Sure. It started with our origin story, if you will, is that Sam and I, the partner, most of the two of us worked on it for the entirety. We went to a play at where was it? Laguna Gloria. We were at Laguna Gloria, and it was great. It was an audio-based play by the Scottish writer, whose name I can't recall right now, but the play was called Susurrus, which is the sound, it's like an onomatopoeia, it's the sound of wind through trees.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it was a gorgeous play. It was about an hour and a half long. We went to go see it in maybe June, July, so it was sweltering, but worth it. And it was on the Laguna Gloria grounds. And
I still have not been out there. I'm really
it's beautiful. I mean, they have the historic house, there's peacocks,
and
there's
the sculpture garden.
There's sculptures, right, as you kind of wander throughout. There's various kind of sculptures that surprise you, right? They're kind of not visible from any other path except for when you kind of come across them. It's really stunning. And they use that to good effect for the story. But yeah, so the story was an iPod, not synchronized, so Sam and I were kind of sometimes off sync. I would laugh at something, and then a minute later he would laugh at the same thing because he'd gotten to that part of the story. We had big placards, which were basically laminated menu-sized things that showed you kind of where to go. And in the environment, there were these kind of ugly numbers kind of throughout the space. And we loved the experience. We thought it was fantastic. The story itself, though, wasn't local. Like you could tell that it was kind of a transplant because it was a Scottish story. It was about nature. It kind of evoked a lot of things from Shakespeare and from nature and that sort of thing, but it wasn't written for Austin. It wasn't written for Laguna Gloria, and it had this kind of awkward technological kind of aspect to it. So we thought we would kind of, I don't know, do something like it, but change those things.
Okay.
The quality of writing is hard to kind of like reach, but all the other things we thought, well, we're designers and developers. We can make something that works like that.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And so that was the starting point. And that, like I said, was probably June, July of last year. And then we applied for South by, which is actually fairly, has a lot of leeway before.
Absolutely.
And we got accepted to South by, and then we realized we actually had to build the thing that we were supposed to be talking about. So deadlines, really important.
They can help.
They totally help, yeah. Immovable deadline.
Yeah.
And so we spent the following 7 months designing, developing,
coffee.
Awesome. Working with our author that we pulled in. We also pulled in another developer to kind of help with more of the technical aspects. And so the four of us managed to do it.
Wonderful. Okay, because and the panel actually was not just your group. It was, I'm just trying to remember back. Okay, I'm just making sure it was clear because there were more than four. There were five. Maybe there was one other.
There were 5 people, and one of them, interesting kind of thing when you create kind of things that you're very excited about, you'll find someone sometimes on the other side of the earth who's also interested in the exact same thing, and that's what happened. We got kind of a just out of the blue email from a designer called Christine van der Zandschroep from Amsterdam, and she had been working in the exact same space. She'd been creating apps. She's also an interaction designer working in a small firm there, a prestigious firm, I hear. And she'd been kind of creating similar experiences. So kind of playing with stories and site-specific and location-aware stories using an app. And so once we heard about it, we're like, yes, come, join us.
Wonderful.
Pulled it right into the orbit, and we've been friends ever since, which has been great.
Yeah. For me especially, so what really appealed to me was this idea of the very local, and really connecting you to your environment. I think that's the expression I keep coming back to in conversation with you, and then I've also translated into many other contexts, including at Maker Faire. And I was like, that's really, the dumpster is meant to connect you to the environment. And so it was like, whoa, your app and the storytelling and making it creative, it's engaging, and it does that. So I was immediately like, let's see if we can do something.
Some connection.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I did your walking story tour. Cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I feel like there's still a couple of technological hurdles.
Yeah, always.
Always, but it was overall like a very enjoyable experience, and I thought the story was great and really interesting. I missed a couple of pieces of it though, and then you're like, but what's going? I mean, I like it when it's the fact that it doesn't necessarily go in order, and you have to put the pieces together.
You have to put the pieces together yourself, right? You can enter it in any particular location, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's a challenge of the writing too, because you can't make cliffhangers. You can't kind of connect to the way we're used to stories kind of connecting. They have to kind of stand alone or be intriguing enough that your brain kind of just wants to fill in the gaps.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. I love being dropped into the middle of a story and then having to figure out. But that's very interesting. Yeah, because for the dumpster and our conversation, it's a lot of the same thing. We talk about our different buckets: air, energy, water, health, waste, and space. And there's not one you have to start with. And ours is probably a little bit cleaner than a narrative, than a fiction narrative, because they are sort of contained little capsules. But we had also talked about connecting Houston Tillotson University to the neighborhood and all these other possibilities. I'm curious if you've been, so you spent the night in the dumpster. Have you, and as we've talked over the past weeks, have you been leaning in some sort of direction?
I have. I've been thinking really of using, so one of the things I really like about kind of site-specific and location-aware is that you're asked to pause, right? Like we're kind of rushing around. Part of also the provocation of Asunder is that we want to, although it's a phone app, we don't want you to kind of be stuck in like the screen mode of your phone. The idea is that it takes you somewhere, right? You're not just at home or in your room kind of tapping away at something and think you're exploring the world. Like it asks, it's a pretty tall order, it asks you to go out in the world and walk around and experience your surroundings. And then when you get there, it asks you to pause, right? And listen to something and maybe consider what's around you and how that might relate to what you're hearing or kind of seeing, if it's augmented reality. And so what I loved about, like you were mentioning, those kind of elemental aspects of the dumpster project, air, water, like these invisible systems, right? You were talking about invisible systems. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. So I think that's something I've always been interested in, is how do you expose or bring out information that we just can't see. It's all around us, but we don't even know it's there, whether those are stories or, actual like data. And so what I've been thinking about for Asunder and possibly the dumpster project is using the campus and creating places where people can pause, right, and consider some of these invisible systems, right? So one particular beacon could be about water and water systems, and kind of a story, if you will. It doesn't have to be a narrative, but just kind of about how that system works. And when you go to the next beacon, the next location, it could be about air, right? So you can kind of collect them all if you want to, or just do one. I think that's the value too, is you can do one and walk away with something. Of course, if you do all of them, I think you get a bigger kind of holistic picture, but even one is valuable.
Well, and I think from our side, like that, when we're trying to do a more formal curriculum, we're also trying to make lessons stand alone. So that would be incredibly useful for us too, because if we have a 7th grade class and only time in one sort of lesson period to do water, we can just include that one beacon station. And then the next lesson when they come back. So you can build the story too over time. It doesn't have to be in one sitting.
Exactly. It all doesn't have to be done at once. And it can be layered. So one of the things we've been talking about, we've been discussing how to incorporate these in the state parks. And there's levels of information as well. So in the case of water, you could adjust one story for kind of a younger audience, right? You could have one story that's very high level and very technical, and then something in the middle that's maybe more accessible, more popular, and more entertaining, but also kind of gets at the same themes, and layer all those 3 different experiences in one location, in one beacon, right? So depending if you're the 7th grader, someone just kind of wandering the campus, a parent maybe visiting their child or whatever, or you're kind of like a student in class, you can kind of tier those things, still at the same location, still in the same theme, but yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Kind of different audiences, different purposes.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Sort of a technical question. So is the beacon basically just the location, and then it's really the app or whatever the technology is that, okay, so that's why you can have multiple stories and then this location triggers?
Location is just a trigger, yeah. The beacons are actually rather dumb. And we're talking about the Internet of Things and smart this and smart that, but basically the only smart thing about a beacon is that it knows you're near it.
No, but that actually I think provides greater flexibility. I was thinking because if you want to go and refine the story and change it as it's easier if you don't have to also change the beacon. The beacon stays just as a location flag, and then really it's and if you push an update to an app or something, it can add story. Okay, so
the power is really in the phone. Like the power of the story, whatever happens when it's pinged about where it is in the phone.
Okay.
So it has much broader range of capabilities. Although I've talked to people that are kind of seeing how beacons might progress, and the beacons might themselves start holding that information as well.
Oh, okay.
We'll see. I think a probably older interaction that's similar is a QR code, right? So the QR code was just this graphic representation, kind of a staticky looking thing in the environment, and when you held up your phone to it, the phone would recognize that particular mark, and then it would probably bring you to a website, right? So kind of the intelligence was in the web, and then this little QR code just kind of triggered that particular data connection, right? So it's similar to that.
Okay.
It's very similar.
Okay. Okay, very interesting. Let's see. So what are some of the things, I don't want to just make it about Dumpster, I want to hear more about your background. What are some of the things in design right now, and I mean maybe it does all relate to this, design, what are some of the things interesting you in the world right now?
Oh gosh, what's interesting me in the world right now? Good question, except I can't think of anything at the moment. Hold on. We have been really focused on this. Actually, so this is kind of a part of a bigger kind of ecosystem in Austin. So I organized the interactive installation meetup, right? Because I'm interested in how can all these things that I know as a designer about digital, kind of interactions be put in a physical space. And so Asunder is one extension of that. Organizing the meetup brings a lot of those people that are interested in this thing together, whether they have any experience whatsoever. They range from people that are just like, hey, I have this Arduino, which is this little, electronic piece, and I hooked it up to a lamp, and when I move my hand in front of the sensor, it turns the lamp off and on, super simple, to people that are full-time artists, have been, digital artists or fine artists for decades, right? And their interest in how to incorporate technology and interaction into their work. So it's it runs the whole spectrum, and which is fantastic. And so we're talking as a group in Austin just about how to bring these experiences more into the world, right? So Asunder is super lightweight. We didn't really need permission. We kind of put the beacons in public spots and just, it was a bit guerrilla, right?
Yeah,
we just
that.
We just left them there. They're these little boxes. If you find them, well, we've lost $30, how much they cost. But otherwise, it's a pretty low infrastructure. But some of the things that people want to do would require the city to approve a space, or
in state parks,
right? A park to kind of allow you to install it temporarily, or permanently. Permanent art is about a 20-year engagement. That's how long permanent art works. So kind of thinking about how do we kind of activate Austin to have more of these types of things that people could stumble across, right? So that's one of the things about Asunder, is that once you've downloaded the app, another story could be introduced, and it would kind of ping you hey, there's something new here, and then you would go, and so there is this kind of aspect of discovery, which I like, kind of engaging in the public sphere. It's not you're walking in a gallery and you're going to have this art experience, you're just walking down Congress and this thing, whatever, this digital thing, this interactive thing, kind of asks you to confront it or think about it or deal with it or ignore it or walk past
It's so
it.
good because we're all the whole thing of we're so connected to our phones, but then it's that I love it's turning it on its head, and it's no, it will force you to connect to what's outside you as well.
Look up and you're what?
But it is dependent on this very thing.
Well, that was the flip, right? It's how can we use the the knowledge that I know as a professional person that mostly works with apps, and Sam is a developer who mostly develops apps, and how do we just turn this thing on its ear and have it do something different, right? But also the public sphere is just an interesting place for art, because a lot of people are not so engaged in the art scene or whatever that they'll go to all these events. Some people do, but I think it's interesting if you can capture people kind of in their day-to-day life and have them pause. If the Dumpster were got approval to be on 8th Street for a couple of weeks, right? Like, what kind of conversations would you have there? You wouldn't have in any other way, because the people walking on the street would be like, why is there a dumpster? And who's in there? What are you doing?
I like this idea very much. Well, because we've done, we were at South by Southwest Eco at Brush Square Park last
oh, good. So
year.
the dumpster was out in the
there.
wild.
We were out in the wild. And I would like, we like to do more things like that, especially as we develop it. And we want it to look like it's a dumpster, and then you look inside and there's this moment. There's some really interesting things to keep advancing that we could definitely do. I was gonna. So how are you finding? So if you're organizing this interactive installation meetup and talking with other people, how are you finding Austin? Have you gotten to the point where you are starting to engage city government, have those conversations about doing?
We're getting close. I think other people have been in this kind of have had momentum longer, and I think we found each other as people that have this goal in common. And so actually the conversation, the brunch I'm going to have after this is with one of these lifelong artists who's really wanting the city to get more progressive about permanent art in public sphere, and he's definitely pushing for it. So I would say with Asunder, there have been different entry points, right? So the meetup is one, and then Asunder has been another, and we have been approached by parks. It seems that's to be the place, and parks also own or kind of manage museums in town. So there's Elizabeth Ney Museum.
Oh, it's so fantastic!
Which is fantastic. I hadn't been there in 15 years.
I had never been out there until West Studio Tours a couple of weeks ago. I was like, this is I never knew this was here, in the middle of the city.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. In the middle of Hyde Park. And it's this 1800s mini castle, right? It's a little studio, but it looks like a little castle, and it's in the middle of Hyde Park. A lot of even the neighbors think that the park around it, which is owned as historical, right? The whole kind of area around this little bridge and little creek is a historical spot, so they can't develop it. But the neighbors thought it was a dog park, right? So they were like, oh, great, can we add more dog trails and kind of do this thing? And the city's like, actually, no, this thing is an 1800s house of this fantastic sculptor. And so we've been talking. They were at Maker Faire, right, and approached and thought it might be really interesting. Could Asunder kind of help tell the story of the Elizabeth Ney, kind of the grounds and her kind of legacy that she's had in the Austin art scene and kind of beyond. Yeah, so it's a great story.
Yeah, because I walked around the house, and you're reading. It's the usual museum type thing. But and then there's thinking about audio tours, but some sort of blending of those, like
sometimes going beyond in some way.
Going beyond.
Right.
Very nice. Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, that seems like an ideal. Is that owned by City of Austin or is it privately held? I'm curious.
I always get a little confused about the layers. So one is I'm talking to some state park people. I think it's the City of Austin. Yeah, public spaces parks. So I think that's local.
Okay.
Right. Okay. There's a local kind of entity, and then there's like a bigger state entity. Yeah, so they're local, and so that might be an interesting conversation to have with them.
Fascinating.
We'll see. And it's interesting because they're kind of against, it's such an old house, historic house, it has a definite feel, and they don't want it muckied up with technology, right? And so it's how do you keep a very light touch, which I think Asunder does well too, right? It is very high tech and very kind of up to the moment as far as what the phone's capabilities are, but it doesn't look technological when you enter a space that's from the 1800s, right? It doesn't ruin the
That's an extra layer of talking about invisible processes, like an invisible technology process added to everything. Because it's in. I'm sure if you I think you were saying if you know where to look for the beacons. But I was looking all over when I was doing the tour because I knew I'm like, okay, they're going to be small. They're going to be something really. I could not find them, especially the ones that were on a street corner. I'm like, surely. I'm like, is it on top of the building? I couldn't.
We put them on top of poles. There are photos of us kind of climbing and putting on top of just
I
a
was
random
desperate
pole.
to find them. I'm like, I want to see but that's
indoor outdoor tape. If not the rare earth magnets that are holding up this thing, which are powerfully strong. What's also surprisingly strong is outdoor double-sided tape.
You had mentioned this.
That stuff is the MacGyver of things. It's if you want to attach this to that, just
now you can also get some rare earth magnets.
If one of those partners is metal.
Yeah.
Incredible.
But you have to, exactly. So They're super fun, and there's all different shapes and sizes and strengths, so you don't have to get one of them that are as strong as these.
Yeah, it's powerful. I'm a little scared of those around electronics, though. It's like,
well, as long as there's
phone?
no hard drive, right? I mean, magnets are for magnetic discs, right? So that's the problem, right? Or credit cards, which is other thing's magnetic, right? Then it's gonna interfere.
It's gonna interfere.
But flash drives, you know.
Those are okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's if there's another piece of something that's magnetized inside the technology, yes, then we'll monkey with it. Yeah, but in general, well, and so like an old school TV, which had, you know, something like moving, you know, so E&M waves, electromagnetic waves, right? That a magnet would distort the if you're creating a field on purpose, then the magnet will distort that. So.
Oh, interesting. So you put a magnet up to an old TV, and it would just kind of like ruin the.
Distort, yeah, and probably depends on how strong the magnet is, whether it would be permanent or not, right? Because if you pull something out of whack in the interior, but
that's it.
Yeah, let's see. So, okay, so what? I don't know. Do you want to talk about what? I'm curious to know what else you do besides Stories Asunder and this interactive storytelling. If you want to go into it.
If I want to go into it? Gosh, I don't know. I think I'm actually quite deep into it. Like I have, you know, I've worked and then I do have spent a lot of my spare time kind of working on this. So I think, engaging in the art scene in Austin and kind of learning what that's about. Meeting with people. So Fusebox is a local festival, and they were interested in possibly having an Asunder experience because they're interested in kind of art plus technology.
And that whole the history of the site. I mean, so I was out at Fusebox at the old tank farm.
Oh, right. Yes.
So there's some really interesting possibilities there, especially as one of the ideas of that festival was the community input phase of the redevelopment of that site.
Right, Think East. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. I was trying to remember. Talk about multiple layers because Fusebox. I'm a little confused. Fusebox seems much bigger. The Fusebox Festival.
Yeah, Fusebox is a festival. I think it's been going on for about 12 years, and it is a very diffuse festival. Like a lot of festivals, you know, have like an epicenter, like the convention center for Maker Faire, or you know, Congress for certain kind of art fairs. And Fusebox, I think, has just, you know, there's things that happen at UT, there's things that happen downtown, there are things that happen on the east side. And so it's a long-running festival, but I think it's very diffuse in kind of where their events are. And it's really broad. Like I think originally their focus was really more on performance arts. And that has kind of incorporated kind of new things, including art and technology. And so that's kind of where that intersection was. But they won a grant, and I think it was don't quote me on this, but an Art in Public Places grant, which allowed them to have some input or lots of input over how the Think East property was developed. And Think East is this East Austin area that used to be, like I said, tank farm for kind of really noxious chemicals in a kind of not wealthy neighborhood, right? Which is why that was allowed to happen and why it went on for so long.
And close to an incredible number of schools within a 1 mile radius and leaking anyway.
Yeah, and the neighborhood, you know, for years really pushed against that. They weren't passively kind of waiting around for someone to fix it. Like they were actively engaged in like getting this toxic stuff out of their neighborhood, and they won. And so there's a rich story, like 20, 30 year kind of like struggle right of the neighborhood to make the city aware that, you know, people were getting ill and people were having headaches, like there were these symptoms from kind of being around this chemical stuff that wasn't good. Yeah. And so so Think East, now the tanks are gone. They have this ghost tank, which I think is a fabulous thing, which is I guess it's kind of just a storytelling tool, right? It's in the shape, it's like very thin beams, and it's in the shape of a tank, like its scale and size. But inside there are photocopies of documents that were sent from residents of the city. There's letters back and forth, so it's really kind of detailing the history of the struggle of getting like this toxic stuff out of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I definitely spent some time in there because. So you'd mentioned, how long have you been in Austin?
I've been in Austin since '94, but then I left, lived in San Francisco for a couple of years and came back.
Yeah, I've only been here for coming up on I guess it's been a little over 2 years, 2.5 years, but all of these things it's great to get to learn, like Elizabeth May and this history of Austin. So, having you and like know more of the history, especially, and then doing this technology and connecting people to it. But how have you felt you've seen Austin, and maybe specifically the art scene, develop over the time that you've been here? And maybe even stepping away, like, I don't know if you stepped away for long enough to see a bigger shift. And, you know, sometimes it's, you don't see the day-to-day increments, but when you step
when
away,
you leave and come back.
yeah.
You know, it's hard to tell. I think I've changed, and so it's hard to tell if the things that I notice and enjoy about Austin are due more to my changes or the city's character changing. I mean, obviously, we've grown significantly. I've been through like a couple of boom and bust cycles, which has, you know, kind of changed the city. And I think my just inputs have been very, what would I call them? Kind of discreet, right? So when I was at the Elizabeth Ney, it wasn't because I was really part of a bigger art scene, but just because they offered sculpture classes, and it was the only place that offered them. And so if you ever go to the area, there's the historic house, but on the property there's like this kind of older structure, maybe from the 1950s or 60s, and it's on stilts, and that's where they would have the sculpture classes in there. So for me, it was just a Sunday morning ritual to get there, coffee in hand, 11 o'clock in the morning, and stay until 1, and just kind of congregate there, kind of making clay sculpture. Right. So I knew of the museum, and I had seen it because obviously it was on the same ground. I had shared the name, but yeah, I don't know. They're very small. I guess I'm not really. I don't know if I have a lot to say about kind of the bigger arcs of kind of how Austin has changed, but the small things, I don't know, I loved. And the Ney was shut down, I think, because I can't remember. I think there was actually a dispute between the city and the people that were organizing the sculpture classes, and so it's kind of like, oh,
yeah,
the house still stands. It has new plans for it. You know, now that I talked to the director of the Ney, like I kind of know where that's heading, and I was like, oh, interesting. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm curious because my father's lived here for a lot of years, so I'd been coming in increments, but not enough to feel connected to it and really like notice change over the years. Like sometimes I think back to like, what was it like in 1994?
It was sleepy. I always say, if you ever seen Slacker, it was a lot like Slacker. Slacker was shot, well, it was released in 92, which leads me to believe it was probably shot in 1991 or whatever. And of course it's super quirky with the conversations, but it was a very sleepy city. You know, like you really could live here without having really a job, and you'd get by just fine.
So do you feel like it, with every boom bust, did it increase and then come back down, or did it sort of increase and plateau and it's just been building up?
Yeah, I think we haven't had, like, even our tech booms haven't, at least real estate wise, caused like those super high spikes. Like they're basically speculative spikes, right? In Las Vegas and San Francisco and New York and so forth. And so yeah, we don't tend to kind of crash. So yeah, we do kind of peak, and then we kind of reset, I think, to more moderate expectations, but we never crash. And so yeah, so I think it has been kind of this like upward trajectory in size and scale. I mean, definitely we've grown a ton. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's so, I'm liking learning and getting the dumpster project to be a part of Austin. I mean, of course we want it to grow larger than that, but I think starting it really here, and especially having the location on this campus and so much history here, I feel like it's really important that we connect to our local community first, and there's so many good organizations doing other good work. So besides arts organizations, are there other people you're talking to? Like, who else has approached Stories Asunder for, besides, if there are others outside of our other arts and design scene?
Actually, I think it has been predominantly art and design. As I mentioned, the parks folks was actually someone I worked with when I was in publishing. So as my earlier kind of design career, I was in publishing, and someone who was at the South by at the South by conference was someone that I'd known back then, and now she's part of the Texas Parks and Recreations. And so she was interested in like, okay, how can we encourage, because in her mission, right, like, so everyone's trying to kind of fulfill certain missions, and in their case it's how do we get more people to visit, how do we get people more engaged and you know, kind of thoughtful about what's in nature and what's in the park system, and then how do we educate children on that. And so again, this 3-tier thing of like, if we could have stories in place, and some are for children, you know, some are for people that regularly visit and maybe have a deeper understanding of the flora and fauna, you know, that they're looking at, and some are just stumbled across it. Right?
Yeah.
It's like an introductory, a deep, I guess would be children's level introductory, and kind of a deep dive into something.
What all of this has gotten me thinking about the parks and sort of maybe that more expert level, and then also something like Think East, and just that, and also thinking about phones and technology and Health Kit, is what about the capacity for input into the system? I could see it as a really interesting way of like telling the story, but also like gathering data for parks, especially for nature, like, okay, show us what species you're on your walk did you find, and we can better catalog, right? It's crowdsourcing the data gathering, especially for community health reasons. Like, it would be really interesting. I don't know if it's there yet, because I would, for air quality, like, okay, breathe into, your little tube. If you could hand out and let's measure for where you live. There's a lot, as soon as you get medical, there's a host of confidentiality, and so more along the lines of in a park, like, what species did you see? And we can bird count more accurately and things like that. Do you see, would there be a way to incorporate that? Some of it I think is a technological question with the app and sort of the ability you'd have to have some place to upload and store that information.
Yeah, and there have people that have been asking about that, basically in kind of a couple parts. One is kind of using different type of data, right, to tell another type of story, more of a data-based story. So like you're saying, air quality or bird sightings, that sort of thing, excuse me. And also I think we've been asked, is there a way to allow people to share their stories, right? To kind of leave a story, a memory, an experience at a particular location. And I think it's funny, you have to at some point draw parameters around a thing,
Absolutely.
Especially when it's unfunded and it's kind of a passion project of your own. So I think the dotted line we drew around Asunder was that it was really more of a storytelling, so it was really more of like you're an audience and not necessarily a participant. But what I think is interesting is that all these ideas are like close neighbors, right? And things could kind of go in this direction or that. For instance, we met someone at South by who has done something similar. Again, you kind of find like the birds of a feather, and he came to our speaking event as well. And he is from Norway, and he has created an app where you can basically pin drop, locate, like site-specific, location-aware, any kind of story that you want. So it's really just you use your phone as a recording device, and then you're like, this is where I am, so this is where the story stays. And the only way you can find that is if you're in that particular location.
Oh, interesting.
And it's interesting, he's kind of taken the types of sharing that happen like on Facebook, if you will. It's like, I'm going to share this on, publicly. Or I'm going to share this to friends, and friends of friends only.
Yeah,
so that you can draw like smaller, bigger circles depending. And so you could leave, very specific audio, it's all only audio, leave very specific audio messages or stories or whatever for just you and your twin sister or something. Or you could open it up to the world, or it could be like a group, right? Like, we are the Bird Watchers of America, we're going to be here, this is what we're recording. So everyone, companies have loved this idea, right? Like, he's publishers and National Public Radio and all these people were going after him and saying, fantastic, how can you help us? How can we kind of take what you've developed and then shift it into what our missions are? Excuse me. But the key says, and he goes, this is the secret of it, is that people aren't using it, right? Like, organizations see, museums and NPR and publishers see how they could use it, but the issue is that people aren't using it. Like, your regular people aren't leaving these little messages, and he's trying to like crack that nut. He's trying to figure out. And I think it's a question of prompt. Like, I think given a perfectly blank piece of paper or a perfectly blank audio file or perfectly blank computer screen, a lot of people don't know what to do with that, right? I think artists are the ones that by nature have to fill it in or take the dive into the kind of blank and make something out of it. It's kind of hard, I think, sometimes for creative people to kind of think back.
Well, especially when it's sort of an on-the-go moment too, where you're like, if you don't have a thought or a prompt, I can absolutely.
Right, and so I think he's trying to figure that out, and we've kind of seen that as well, that the creation is difficult, right? And so you need to kind of create, as a designer, as an artist, kind of making something for other people to participate in, you have to scaffold them, you have to build something upon which they can kind of pull. I think the dumpster does that, right? It's not like you're just having a kind of open-ended conversation about sustainability and the environment and so forth. You've built something that people can kind of react to, push against, expand. I'm sure you've had plenty of people come to you and say, but what if the dumpster could do this and do that? And I think even if those things never come to be, because they're kind of outside of your dotted line, but they're still part of the bigger conversation,
Mm-hmm,
right?
absolutely.
So I think
absolutely.
yeah, you have to kind of figure out what you can do,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's valuable to have other people come up and go, oh, have you thought about, you know?
No, and we love it. And as long as that's that engagement, like we just want to engage you, and however it does, exactly. But what we're going to actually build on the dumpster, we've had to draw
able to do is this. Yeah, you have to kind of draw.
But especially with kids, I mean, so we see this a lot with kids when we're teaching lessons. Like we went to the 4th grade over at Blackshire Elementary last week, and we're prepping them. We do the science classes in 5th grade, so we were like, there's an intro of what you're going to be doing next year, and like, you know, so at the end we're like, and what else should we do? And yeah, there's a ton of great ideas, and that's perfect way to just get them thinking, and then we can bring in the more specifics, like, okay, yeah, let's also think about that. We're teaching science thinking as well, so it's like, okay, yeah, all those wonderful ideas, and now like here's how you actually go about investigating those and testing,
and doing little experiments around it.
Exactly. Cool. I had that led me to something, and then I've forgotten. Oh, so I don't know if you or if you've had this other Norwegian designer.
Oh yes, Osmund. He has a little double. What are the little umlauts or whatever?
Umlauts, yeah.
He was awesome. He seemed like a character out of a film. He had like hair.
Do you have ideas? I think we're always looking for new prompts or something. Is there something you can say or start the conversation about how you go about designing a good prompt?
You know, I think some of it's trial and error, right? I think I have done some thinking about this for other projects. There's this artist called Candy Chang, and I think her call to fame is that she creates these publicly, like in the public kind of prompts. So actually we have one in Austin. I should tell you, I don't know where that is exactly, but she has this Before I Die.
Oh yeah,
idea.
I've seen those all over the world.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So
that's her. Wow, I didn't know. I never knew who was behind that.
Yeah, her name is Candy Chang.
Oh, wonderful.
And she's, I think, a Louisiana-based artist. And at least the Before I Die, the original kind of instance of it was in Louisiana, and it was an old abandoned building, side of a building, but it was a nice big flat building. Mm-hmm. So kind of like the wall you have here, she painted it in black chalk paint, and then stenciled the prompt, right? Before I die, I want to, and then like long blank, and then dot, and then repeated it. So the entire wall is just basically covered with this question. Before I die, I want to, what have you, and then she leaves like a big bucket of chalk, right, and then left. And then, within a few hours, you can see people all over the place kind of writing, before I die, and they range again from like the silliest answer in the world to like really profound things. And I think what's awesome about her work is that as a whole, it's, a good prompt is as pleasurable or as interesting to answer as it is to read what other people have answered, right? There's one thing if you just say something and no one finds what anybody else says interesting, but I think when you walk up to the wall, unless you're the very first person there, already some people started to fill it in. And so already they're helping you think about what your answer is as you're kind of pondering your own. And then when you add yours, it kind of adds up like this tapestry of like from the silly to the profound to the, everything in between, to the surprising, to the kind of mundane, right? And so it all kind of evens itself out. And even if you walk up to a, finished wall, just reading it, right, is a form of participation. So I think that's an amazing and good prompt. And hard to do.
I really like that. I mean, it may be as pleasurable to answer as it is to read other answers. Like, yeah, exactly. I'd love to think of a way to do something on the outside of really connected to dumpster to that. We've been talking with for our next event, going to some places and wanting to make dumpster more of an interactive exhibit. And one thing we were thinking of was the idea of footprints and carbon footprints, but maybe actually like painting footprints on the dumpster, and just sort of 3 tiers, and if it was related to a pledge or something to reduce, and whatever, and maybe we have a bunch of different ways. We want to be non-prescriptive, but saying like, here are some ways you can reduce, reuse, recycle, reduce your carbon footprint. But that's an interesting, that gives a nice frame to think about.
Her work is really good. Another one that I really liked, again, talking about how you come across, because they're public, right? That's the whole point, is that anyone can engage with these things. The ask is really low. It's like either pick up a piece of chalk and write 1 or 2 words or don't. and just read what other people have written. So another one that she did, I think, was called The Career Path, and it was done on a campus somewhere, and it was a very long kind of gateway, I guess, between two parts of the campus. So a lot of the kids would kind of have to traverse back and forth on this particular sidewalk / street. And so all along the sidewalk, again, I think she spray painted it, maybe with like semi-permanent spray paint, there is such a thing. And her question this time was, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a blank. Now I want to be a blank. So it was a two-part question. And of course you capture people that are, you know, have been professors for many years, people that are just starting out in their career, people that are probably in the middle of their career and might change their career. And what's interesting about that one is that within each one, so someone might say, you know, as a kid I wanted to be an astronaut, but now I am a philosophy professor. You know, so it, like the gap between those two is the gap that your brain fills in. It's like, okay, how does a kid who originally wanted to be an astronaut turn into a philosopher? It's like, oh, you can kind of see it. They were interested in exploration. They were probably super brainy, you know, but astronaut maybe wasn't a possibility because of eyesight and physical and what have you.
And there's only like 4
there's
years.
Only 4 astronauts. There's quite a few. There's probably like 20 philosophy professors in the world. Right.
There's an order of magnitude difference. It doesn't matter that.
Right. To the ones that might say, when I wanted to grow up, I wanted to be a policeman, and now I am a policeman. Right. So it's like the kid that actually got their wish, but then even that is a story, because is what the child imagined being a policeman like.
Exactly.
What the adult knows that being a policeman's
well,
like.
And it might not have been a direct path. And
You
know, that's
they might have been a philosophy professor and then an astronaut and then gone back to police.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
And so again, as you consume, as you read other people's and offer your own, yeah, it's interesting. It was interesting. Great prompt. And the fact that it was on campus and it was on this kind of this long, you know, path between these two parts of the campus.
I would love to do something like that here. That would be really intriguing to think about.
And, so that you were talking about how you've seen those all over the world. So as the creator of these prompts, she really does want to engage as many people as possible as part of her mission. And so she gives you kits. And so you could order from her website, not very expensive, maybe a couple $100, a stencil kit to replicate what she's done somewhere else, right? So you could buy the stencil of the Before I Die, or you could buy, and it has instructions like.
I saw the Antes de Morir in Mexico. It was great. So it's been translated.
In different languages. And so she really likes this idea of expanding what she's done beyond like what she can do, right? By letting other people kind of take it and run with it, you know, translate it, put it in different locations.
Oh, it's cool. That's fantastic. Well, we can start wrapping up. I mean, this was great. Maybe one other question. If you were going to have a dumpster nickname, what would it be? Because we want to keep working with you and we really like all of our partners and collaborators. So I'm, you know, Doctora Basura. We like to not take ourselves too seriously, but it's really open to whatever you would want. You know, we have the Dirty Professor, we have Professor Dumpster, we've had, you know, some things related to Oscar the Grouch, but it's really like you know, and you know, I'm putting you on the spot here, but if you want to.
You are putting me on the spot. Let me think. Do I know of any like trashy name? I know you mentioned there's all kinds of puns, like a lot of puns around it, but I do like something like, trash talker. I don't know. That doesn't seem very like. I'm not really a trash talker, but.
Well, we've had the like professor of trash, right?
I'm not sure I want to be a professor.
No, that's we can try to reserve that one for other
professors.
Yeah. But we haven't had a true like just trash talker. I've tried something with design.
Right. Let me think. There's also this idea of like disposable, which is kind of a negative, right, connotation, because we've started to throw we have been throwing things away for 50 years, right? We need to stop doing that. Yeah, let me think on that.
Absolutely. It's just it's our tweak on the like spirit animal, which you know we don't need. I mean, you're welcome to share your spirit animal, but
yeah, maybe something about disposable, like the story of the disposable, something like not promoting it. I'll think about
well, people can look for that on our website eventually when we have like you know
a hashtag.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, great. Okay.
Yeah, awesome.